What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Combine here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's a special show today as will be live streaming throughout the day from around until 2 o'clock, talking about the third day of the NFL Draft. But first and foremost, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Alfredo Arteaga from 3 Yards Per Carry here today. Alf, how you doing today, my guy?
I'm doing fine. My voice is not doing so well. If anybody saw our stream last night, first of all, it was a mission to try to just get that thing on because you got to understand we are about 50 feet away from where the stage is. And the only thing that's between us and where the stage is and where the Miz was just screaming his head off was basically a wall, right? And if that doesn't make things worse, they put a giant speaker right behind our desks. So when we got there, they said, "Oh, you got table 2," and we were thinking, "Wow, that's pretty good." And then we saw where we sat, and we were like, "Whoa, we're right here. We're right up in front." We had no idea the havoc it was going to cause in trying to do a live stream. So essentially, what we had to do is just lower all our settings, and we finally pulled it off. But part of pulling it off was me screaming into a microphone for an entire hour. So my voice is just a little bit shot.
I know, again, with 3 Yards Per Carry, I know you guys will have a post-draft episode as well. I'll be also be having a post-draft episode with a couple of other guests as well, breaking down each pick that the Miami Dolphins have. Now, Miami Dolphins only had one selection last night. And, we've been saying throughout this process, they need an inside linebacker, middle linebacker, definitely. With the way the board was falling for a lot of these AFC and these AFC East teams, they were bulking up big time on offensive weapons and especially along the trenches and the run game. So it made sense they would attack the middle linebacker position first. Now, I was saying, you could have a guy along the likes of a Troy Anderson, Chad Muma, Leo Chenal. What I failed to mention was that Channing Tindall was on the Dolphins' radar big time, and he was on a 30 for 30 pre-draft.
Well, I'm going to show you something. I want to show you something before you continue. Last night, I showed it on the stream. I made like a little big board for pick 102. And look at my 3 linebackers. Let me see if you could see it right there. My 3 linebackers.
I see Anderson, Tindall, and Chenal. Muma.
No, Muma. Yeah.
Muma, okay. I see the edge of was that Agbanio and
Bonito, but he got taken.
Yeah. Oh, Jabo. Yeah.
Jabo and Bonito.
Ojabo and Bonito. I thought that was Otito Agbanio from UCLA. I had his pass rush coach on, Eddie McGilver, who also coached the number 2 overall selection, Aiden Hutchinson, as well in the offseason. Big fan of both those guys. But Alf, talk to me about Channing Tindall on the pre-draft process. Like, what did you know about him even before he was in Miami?
What I know about him is his Georgia career. He fits a need. He really does. Last night I was asked is this a guy that steps in right away and starts day one? Well, first of all, we already have Landon Roberts at that Mike position. So, it's not going to be easy for Channing Tindall to replace him, but he's going to play. Like there are going to be snaps for him this year, plenty of snaps. If not, he might even outright replace Landon Roberts. And Landon Roberts has taken a couple of injuries as a Miami Dolphin, so you never know when you're going to need Channing Tindall to actually play a lot of snaps. And he's just a perfect fit. He's a perfect fit. He can run. He could be the mic. He could play sideline to sideline. Even had some coverage ability. Is he a guy that can play 3 downs? I don't know, but the evidence so far suggests is that he can be one of those guys that can play 3 downs. So I love the pick. I absolutely love the pick. The only other pick that the only other guy that they could have taken, and I would have said, yeah, okay, that makes a little bit more sense is Zach Tom. That's it. But other than that, Channing Tindall, he was like I showed you, he was number 2 on my linebacker board for pick 102, and the other 2 guys were not on the board, so I had no choice. I took my number 2 guy because they took my number 1 and my number 3 guy for 102. So yeah, you got to be happy with the pick.
I mean, I'm definitely happy with the pick as well. And in my article this morning that I wrote while I was I woke up seriously, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to write an article around like midnight, 1 a.m. So I'm like, I'll just wake up have all my jots dotted down and just put it onto an article and got it up around 9:30, 10 a.m. And basically, projection-wise, for Channing Tindall, like speed, right? You think about speed. You think about how Mike McDaniel wants to build this offense and defense, overall this Dolphins team as well. Speed, passion, and look, he was one of the fastest linebackers in this year's class. He's a player who covers like Javon Holland in the backfield and possesses serious tackling and hitting power like a Landon Roberts. Like it's just like a good mesh of both. And his range and speed is something I haven't seen in the Miami Dolphins linebacker core in such a long, long time. Like, when was the last time you saw a Miami Dolphins linebacker have such fluid hips and lateral agility that allows him to move sideline to sideline, Alf?
Well, you don't want to mention Zach Thomas, right? Because that would be sacrilege. But it really kind of is Zach Thomas. Like this is the first time that they don't have a cookie cutter middle linebacker, which there are thousands of them. Okay, like you can always find, like everybody says, oh, we need a thumper at Mike linebacker. And I'm like, well, you could find a thumper anywhere you want. Like one of my favorite players on the Dolphins roster, because I think he possesses extreme value, is Calvin Munson. Now, when they had him, they actually cut him twice. The reason why they cut him twice is because you could find those guys. You want a guy that could just run the alley and be a thumper at middle linebacker? Absolutely. You could find those guys. And like I said, Calvin Munson is that. He can do that. But he can't do what Tindall does now, which is he can actually pick up guys up and out in the flat. He can actually play scrape if you want to. So it's entirely possible that Jerome Baker can kick to a wide rush technique, and then Tindall can play the scrape while Landon Roberts plays the mic. You could do things like that now when you couldn't before.
I mean, not only can he be that Mike, he can be an outside as a Sam or a Will, and he said it in the media session yesterday. In his pre-draft visit when he was looking over the Dolphins, defense, the way Miami uses their linebackers, it's different. They use them everywhere. They put them on the edge sometimes. They put them on the line at Mike, Will, and they're very versatile. And he honestly fits into it. And Chris Greer said it, when you watch his film, especially in Georgia, it's a very talented defense. And they used him in specific packages. They used him as a spy. They used him to blitz. He covers backs and tight ends, and just a lot of the ways that are kind of similar to how he will be used here in Miami. He's done all those things at Georgia. The only thing I've been worried about Tindall especially is that he has not logged over 600 snaps over 4 years in Georgia, and that's because he was behind an uber-talented linebacker core of Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, who were both selected before him. Quay Walker was a bona fide first rounder coming into this process regardless a couple months ago. Nakobe Dean was going to be a first rounder until his medicals revealed that, he had a shoulder issue and opted not to go for surgery. So that was, a narrative to watch out for. But other than that, I mean, he's a great run defender, provides a good outside rush, and he's able to get around bigger offensive linemen because of his speed. The other thing is that what the Dolphins lacked in the linebacker core, especially in run defense, is the fact that unlike Baker and Roberts and AVG, Tindall takes very, very good angles and he pursues ball carriers very, very well. Very, very well. The downside of that is when I watched his film at Georgia, there weren't a lot of teams trying to attack his weakness, which is straight up going for Tindall. A lot of his plays were, free rushes, free rushes or free plays on the ball carrier, which allowed him to log, he set a new career in tackles last year in Georgia. Alf, do you agree or do you disagree?
I disagree slightly in one sense. Before they made the trade for Tyreek Hill, and I was doing most of my film study, Nakobe Dean was on my short list at 29. He was one of the guys that I had written down at 29. To be completely honest with you, when I usually do my film study based on the pick, right? So at 29, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, I saw him play at Michigan. I don't need to put on the film for Aiden Hutchinson. I know he can play, right? So I watched a lot of Nakobe Dean. I had seen him already. I've seen every single Georgia game in the last 3 years. Okay. So I had seen enough of Nakobe Dean before, but then I rewatched him and I kept noticing one thing over and over and over again. Channing Tindall kept getting in on every single one of his plays. Okay. So while Nakobe Dean, made a lot of big plays, okay, and was probably the better quote unquote football player at Georgia, Channing Tindall, shined enough. And I think really that this is just a situation where there's so many players at Georgia. Was he the third best player? Maybe not, because Jordan Davis, I think he's going to be really, really good. So maybe fifth best player. That's really a curse for him. That's just what hurts him. It doesn't really hurt him as a prospect. It just hurts his draft status. And you saw it right there. Like, if he didn't have the teammates that he had, I think that's probably one of the drawbacks that people had in him. And scouts looked at him and said, okay, how good really is he? Because he has all of this talent around him. Maybe this is a guy that, we're over projecting. I don't think it's an over projection. If you put on the tape, taking on blocks, shedding blocks, making hits, running sideline to sideline, that still translates. That has nothing to do with the talent around you. Okay. The only thing that does have something to do with the talent around you is when you run the alley as a middle linebacker. And do you run it free? There's plenty of evidence to suggest that, yes, he has run it free because, of course, those two defensive tackles that they had. But there's also tape of him shedding blocks. Okay. Yeah. And also playing scrape. So if you see a guy that plays scrape and plays Mike and plays it both very, very, very well, that's a legitimate prospect. That's not a guy that's being helped along by the talent in front of him.
The other thing is, too, that what people would say is that he was, quote-unquote, undersized. He's 6'2", around 210 pounds. Yes, he might be a little bit lightweight, but in the NFL, throughout the training process in the program, he's going to put on at least 10 to 15 to maybe even 20 more pounds as a linebacker, within his second, third season in the NFL. That I don't have a problem with. But when I watched him, even though he was undersized, he packed a lot of power and strength. Yeah. For a guy in that weight class. And it was just surprising for me to see. I mean, he's a hard hitter. He flies by blockers, blowing up run plays. I mean, the other thing too, which I kind of missed on my part, was that his special teams prowess is what will allow him to log more snaps as the game goes on. Again, like, he can run down the field. He can potentially, if you really wanted to, put him in as a gunner on special teams as well. That's how good he can be. The other thing is, this kind of makes Eric Rowe just a tad bit expendable coming up this year, maybe potentially in training camp or at the end of the season. His cover skills reminds me of a big nickel or that strong safety in that slot position. He's able to cover the flats. He's able to cover the short zones and the middle of the field as well. If you utilize him, maybe him, Baker, ABG in a traditional 4-3 set, you won't have to be in those big nickel positions or a nickel or have more defensive backs on the field than you did last year. And I think that's just the versatility and a package you can use Tindall in.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as his size, I'm not concerned at all. He's going to be listed somewhere around 228, 230. Okay, that's his list weight. Now we'll see what he gets to camp with. Trust me, they will put 20 pounds on him, as easy as possible. I don't. By the way, I don't think he weighs 210 pounds right now. I think he's probably in the 220s. They just want to have They want probably have him at 230 functional. But I really don't worry about size when it comes to linebackers, because we've heard it so many times before. There was a 30 for 30 the other day about that Tampa Bay defense in the 90s with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. And Derek Brooks talks about his draft process. Okay. And in his draft, actually it was a show on NFL Network about that draft when they drafted both Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. And Derek Brooks says that there was about 16 teams First of all, everybody in the league wanted Derrick Brooks coming out of Florida State. But there were 16 teams that had told him, we're moving you to safety because you're too small to play linebacker. 14 years later, he's in the Hall of Fame, unanimous Hall of Famer, first ballot. So I don't worry about that too much. Zach Thomas, when he showed up at camp, everybody was like, is that really going to be a middle linebacker? Because back then, middle linebackers had to be 6'3", 255 pounds. And if you weren't 6'3", 255 pounds, you were looked at, like if you were odd. Zach Thomas rolls in like around 5'10", although he was always listed at 5'11", but he's really not. He's like probably 5'9 3/4.
He's shorter than me, basically.
Okay, so he gets to about maybe 5'10", and he's built basically like a brick. So he's like square. So he's about 228 pounds, and we saw his career. So I don't worry about size. It's about functional strength. They'll get him. They'll get him to about 230 pounds as a pro. I don't worry at all about that.
Now, moving on from Channington, though, Miami has 3 more draft picks today, number 125 in round 4, number 224 in round 7, and number 247 in round 7 as well. What are some of your potential late round targets for the Miami Dolphins?
Well, for 125, absolutely, Zach Tom should be right at the top. Like he should be.
Why Zach Tom over Alec Lindstrom for people who want to say that Lindstrom's coach is there and it would make more sense?
Yeah, I think it's a scheme fit, and simply put, Zach Tom is a better player. He just is, in my opinion.
And here we have Mitchell Wolf, one of the BC football guys who covered Boston College, and he can talk a little bit more about Alec Lindstrom as well. But Alf, go ahead and talk about Zach Tom over Alec Lindstrom.
I think he has more versatility. He can play several positions. I think he allows them to move Robert Hunt to right tackle if it does come down to that. But other than that, I'm looking at my board, and are they really going to take their running back, like their signature guy? Isaiah Spiller is still on the board. Okay, Cameron Harris is still on the board, and that's a guy I really, really like. And yeah, it might be a reach right here for Cameron Harris, but if Isaiah Spiller's gone, the rest of the field that's out there is Pierre Strong, really. Zamir White. Like, who are the best fits? The best fits are Cameron Harris and Pierre Strong. So
I think you can also make an argument for Damian Pierce from Florida as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call as well. As far as the 7th round picks, man, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they even let the interns make those picks. So it wouldn't be surprising the least bit if they try to pawn off both 7th-round picks for like a future 6. So I don't know what could be out there in the 7th round, because usually, first of all, they're really good at playing the UDFA game. So I don't know what they're going to do with those 7th-round picks. I really don't know.
I think, judging based on Chris Greer's draft history, he tries to get special teams guys or just uber athletic guys that can potentially, ball out in a couple games, 2 games, 3 games maybe, and then flip them. Now, of course, the big thing to watch is going to be the UDFA game once the draft ends. And I'm guessing Miami already has a potential list of UDFAs that they think will be available and offer them contracts. And Mitchell Wolf from the BC Bulletin. How are you doing today, my guy?
Doing good. It's been an exciting time so far. I think I agree that I think we'll see Alec Lindstrom go today. I don't hate the Zach Tom love over him. I agree that Zach Tom probably has more versatility. Lindstrom is pretty much a center only, whereas Tom could legitimately play all 3 positions. And if you wanted to play center, I just looked it up. If you run his RAS as a center, it's a perfect 10. So that's pretty impressive. Lindstrom is a bit of a weird fit just because he is undersized, and he has run a lot of different schemes, and he is a solid mover, but he just doesn't have a ton of power at the point of attack. And luckily in the AFC East, you're not dealing with a ton of like huge nose tackles, like 0 or 1 techs, like you would see in like the AFC North. So I think that'd be fine with him. I think that the Applebaum connection is interesting as well. I think I usually mocked Lindstrom to the Dolphins when I was doing my 7-rounders, like in the 4th, just because it did make sense. But I wouldn't be shocked to see them take Zach Tom. Running back was another need that I identified as well. I think there's a ton of good ones on the board. And really in this class, there's just so many interesting day 3 running backs that, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't take one and just grab a UDFA guy. But I think, if you want your lead, kind of your starting pitcher that, has the first few innings as a running back, the guy that's your workhorse, that's Spiller for sure. I'm looking at the rest of the Dolphins depth chart for what it's worth. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I think the linebacker thing with Tyndall is interesting because while you guys were talking, I looked it up. The only other linebacker that's under contract past this year is Jerome Baker. So I think that they might kind of expect him to take somebody's job and then maybe like they don't make the final roster. But I definitely agree with you as well that he's going to be a special teams demon, if nothing else, for his rookie year.
Of course, Mitchell, thank you for that analysis. And Alf, I know you got to get back down there to the draft as it is starting up, as round 4 gets started. So thank you, sir. Look forward to hearing your post-draft analysis on the 3 yards per carry platform.
Thank you for having me. And you have a great show here today with a lot of good guests. So, I hope people are getting good information out of this. So,
of course. Thanks, Alf. You have a good one, sir. Next up, we have my guy, Jeremiah Bogan. How we doing, JB?
What's up, man? It's always good to be here and talk to you, brother.
Of course, man. Thank you so much. The funny thing was when the draft was kicking off yesterday, you and I were going back and forth on some of these picks, right? You and I were going back and forth, and as I'm going through these picks, like I was laughing, we're like, oh man, this guy was way too high, or dude, this is such a perfect fit. Like, in your opinion, what was the best pick you liked out of last night's draft?
Out of last night's or just the day, everything from the days prior?
Well, let's talk about day 1 first, and then we can go on to day 2. So day 1, JB, what was your favorite pick or picks?
I think the funniest thing about this year's draft is when you talk about a draft that coming into it, we were all like, this draft's so unpredictable. It's one of the most unpredictable drafts in recent memory. I think this is actually the first round that I've seen in about 5 years or so where I actually wasn't that upset with a lot of the picks that took place in the draft. I think you could start with the Jets getting Jermaine Johnson at 26 is absolutely ridiculous. I think the best 2 picks of the night were the Giants getting the best tackle and arguably the best DN on the board, and it was amazing to see that the first round didn't go. It was unpredictable, but I still think teams made a lot of really good picks, which was really exciting to see.
I know. And for day 1, Mitch, I know you're a Steelers fan. Big Steelers fan. So tell me, what was your thoughts on the Steelers' 20th pick and then just overall day 1?
I think, like last year, as a Steelers fan, you go into it knowing the team you kind of knew what they were going to do in terms of taking quarterback. Last year, you knew it was going to be Najee Harris. This year, you figured it'd be a quarterback. You just didn't know which one. And for what it's worth, the Steelers did a good job of like being interested in doing their due diligence in all of the quarterbacks in this class. Like, you could make a solid argument for any of them because they were super involved with Sam Howell for a long time. They were very interested in Desmond Ridder. They did a lot of work on Malik Willis. But at the end of the day, like Mike Tomlin said, we scoured the globe looking for a quarterback. We ended up with the guy who, works next door. So I don't love it just because I think in the best possible universe, Kenny Pickett's upside is about Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins level. He just doesn't have the physical traits some of the other guys have. But his floor is also like, it's a Mitch Trubisky or something like that. Like, so I get why they did it. And I don't love it, especially with the way the other quarterbacks fell. And I think that would have been hard to predict, so it's not like I thought it was funny that the next time they picked, all the quarterbacks were still on the board. So, but again, that would have been very hard to predict. So I didn't love it, but it is what it is. I think it'll be tough to predict if he does beat out Trubisky for the starting job, at which point that would be very disappointing. But I mean, the next 2 picks, I was very big fans of getting George Pickens in the second round. And I mean, the Steelers take a wide receiver in the second round. You might as well start stitching his Hall of Fame jacket together, So that's the one thing they do is draft great wide receivers in the second round. George Pickens, as people have been saying on Twitter for the last 2 days, he got that dog in him. So
he got that dog in him. He got that dog in him.
And I just love watching that video of him absolutely taking that poor Georgia Tech defensive back to the woodshed. But I mean, I think he's going to be great. All of his issues were like off-field and medical stuff. So as long as he's healthy and has his head on straight, I think he'll be fun. And then getting DeMarvin Leal in the third, I said on my Fired Up NFL Draft podcast that I thought by the end of the draft, we might think that DeMarvin Leal, or sorry, not the end of the draft, but like in a few years, DeMarvin Leal could end up being like the steal of this draft. And I didn't even think of him as Steelers target, but getting him in the third is really interesting because he's going to be like one of the future defensive ends. Cam Hayward is an awesome player, but he's getting up there in age. So, looking towards the future, getting a guy that can be an impact player on the defensive line, playing, 4-eye or 5 tech, I think that's going to be really fun. Of course, though, as a Steelers fan, it sucks because the Ravens just killed the draft again. Probably my 4 of my favorite picks in the draft overall, honestly, like getting Kyle Hamilton at 14, my number 1 overall player in this class, Tyler Linderbaum, the best center in this class. And I think that's a really interesting fit. Getting David Ojabo, who would have been a first-round pick had he not torn his Achilles, in the second, fantastic. And then Travis Jones, who's an awesome nose tackle in the third, is tremendous value. So, I mean, all those picks are just A pluses for me. So it's just pain.
I mean, it's like the Ravens are blessed by the great GM in the sky by picking the best player available, and somehow it always lands to them.
Yeah, and like they never even like have to trade up. It's just like, oh wow, look how this happened for us. We didn't even have to do
fell
anything.
onto our lap. Kyle Hamilton. Now, Bogan. I have been hearing some things from other people within the scouts world and the NFL world that maybe the Hamilton pick is not the best fit, but me personally, I disagree. When you look at how the NFL is changing, especially offenses and defenses, the offense is becoming such a pass-happy league that defenses are now playing a lot of man, cover one, and too high shells. A lot. And I think with, Marcus Williams, their new signee, and Kyle Hamilton, along with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, like that is just utter just chef's kiss. That Ravens secondary. Talk to me on your thought process of introducing Kyle Hamilton into Mike McDonald's secondary.
I don't think there's a system that Kyle Hamilton doesn't fit in, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about not only arguably the best overall player in this class, one of the best safeties we've seen in recent memory, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, if you don't have a defensive fit for Kyle Hamilton, you're probably not a good coach at the end of the day. If you can't fit him in your defense, I still understand. He's a unicorn. He can play single high. He can play your match quarters. He can come down, cover tight ends. He's a very special player. He's going to come in the box. He can tackle. People will look at his frame. He looks a little thin, but he's tough. He's strong. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you wouldn't want Kyle Hamilton. To get him at 14 is absolute steal, because now you're adding him with two corners who have been all pros in their career. And then I know you mentioned Marcus Williams. They also have Chuck Clark, who's an enforcer on the back end as well. So it's going to be really cool to see what the Ravens are this year. I think people kind of lost what their secondary was with all the players getting injured last year, and them kind of struggling down the stretch because they had to start pulling some guys off the practice squad, play some guys that you didn't expect to be starters for more than a game or two down the stretch. So that's going to be a much improved team. And then, like you said, I mean, they had an A+ draft. They nail it every single year. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting to see them play together.
I saw a stat that the Ravens led the league last year in dime personnel on defense. Their usage of it, I think it was like 17% or something. So, just getting a ton. I mean, now that you're going to have so many great DBs out there, like you said, they'll be running a ton of 3 safety packages, and obviously having guys like Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphreys, one of my favorite players in the NFL.
Think about how the Commanders use their Buffalo style, the Buffalo defense at utilizing 3 safeties on the field. Now the Ravens can essentially basically do that with Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, and the other safeties they have in the backfield, and run a crap ton of dime. Just run a crap ton of dime on these AFC North offenses. I think it'll help, especially against a quarterback like a Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett. Maybe if Deshaun Watson is playing next year, but let's not get into that. One quarterback that I did mock, and I have my good friend Billy Marshall here, who covers the Carolina Panthers, on his podcast. Guys? What's up, Billy? How we doing today?
What's going on?
Good, man. Good. Now, I got a little bit of heat because I mocked Matt Corral to number 6 to the Panthers, and I kind of got word that Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers really liked Matt Corral. Didn't end up being picked number 6, but got picked up number 94. Billy, can you talk us through what the Panthers were thinking at number 6 and whether or not they would potentially get a quarterback in this year's draft?
Yeah, I think they were pretty dead set on one of the offensive tackles at number 6. No matter who it was, I think they had pretty high grades on Ekwonu, Neal, and even Cross. But I think if Ekwonu and Neal weren't there, then they probably would have traded back and maybe flipped their picks with Seattle and picked up something else. But yeah, no, I think obviously they were hamstrung a little bit with the lack of picks, so they had to make a move up to. I mean, I think I don't like giving away picks in the future, but for a quarterback, I think it's fine, and it's a third rounder. It's not like a first or second. So, yeah, I don't know. Like he's a pretty decent player. I don't really dislike him, but getting him in a third, I think, is probably the best value.
It's better than him getting in the first round where you get your franchise left tackle for potentially the next decade. JB Bogan, I'm looking at this Texans draft class right here, and I'm
my favorite.
digging it, man.
That's my favorite class, dude.
I'm digging it, man. You got the number 1 press man corner in Stingley. You have a dog of an offensive lineman in Kenyon Green. You have Petre, who can play anywhere in the defensive backroom. Mechie, who can play all 3 levels of the field. I'm not the biggest fan of Christian Harris, but he fits that cover 2 linebacker mold that Lovie Smith has utilized in the past. And I picked up running back Damian Pierce, who, as Alpha and I spoke early on, could be a target for the Miami Dolphins. Picked up at pick 107. Talk to me about this Texans draft class and what you see, Houston's future looking like.
At the end of the day, you're just getting really good football players, and that's what matters. Like, you're just getting guys who – you have guys with some good football DNA, because when you talk about a guy like Jalen Petre, you're talking about someone that's a little similar to Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu type of guy, and that makes a big impact on your defense. He's also a really good leader in his program. You hear a lot of good things about his character. And then, of course, when you had Derek Stingley, who, when I talk about the best players in the class, it's either him or Kyle Hamilton for me. I don't care what you talk about in the years after his freshman season at 18 years old, for you to come in and be arguably the best corner I've seen at the college football level, a guy who I've comped to Champ Bailey at the end of the day, he's special. And then it was actually crazy because before the Jalen Petre pick, I was sitting there and I think I was texting you at the time, and I was like, dude, if they have a chance to get the 2 best corners in this draft class, if they go ahead and take Booth right here. And then as I heard the name coming out the guy's mouth when it was announced, I was like, man, that's not Booth. But I was like, Jalen Petre, I mean, he's probably not the best player, but he's probably my first or second favorite player in this entire class. And then you go ahead and get John Mechie, add some talent to receiver, because I think what Davis Mills did show last year, and I actually like Davis Mills coming into last year's draft as a late option at quarterback, is he down the stretch he played some good football with not a whole lot of talent around him. And that says a lot about the kid and his makeup, which I think is exciting. Like you said about Christian Harris, not the biggest fan in the world, but I think he does add something that's not on that roster, and that's a lot of athleticism at the linebacker position. And when you talk about the cover 2 defense, he could be your middle of the field runner. So it's exciting. It was exciting to see the Texans pick the way they did, because when I was going through some of the classes, they probably had my favorite class, not based off the best players, but I think the value they got and just kind of changing their franchise DNA and changing their DNA of their roster. It's going to be a complete overhaul. I'm excited to see what they do.
The Ravens just did the most on-brand thing possible, and they're taking Daniel Falele.
Oh man, oh man, that just fits with every like. Honestly, they're getting their guys. They're getting such good fits. But I wanted to talk about this Browns draft class real quick with you, Mitchell. Since you're a Steelers fan and you know more about the AFC North, Perion Winfrey. Alex Wright, and I'm blanking on the 2 and Martin Emerson, Emerson, and I'm blanking on one more person. David Bell. What do you think about this draft class, and can this push the Cleveland Browns back to the playoffs potentially.
I think this year is weird because we don't know the Deshaun Watson situation, how long his suspension will be if there is one. But they needed wide receiver help. They get a power slot kind of player in David Bell, who's a good receiver, like him a lot, and get him a really good value spot. Great value on Perry and Winfrey. He's one of the most explosive defensive linemen I've ever seen. His get off is incredible. He's going to fit really well at 3-tech for the Browns. He was kind of miscast at Oklahoma playing as a nose tackle, which was a little unfair to him. Alex Wright, I honestly did not get the chance to watch a lot of him. I know that some people were really big fans of him as a later pick, but they might not have thought he would be there at the later pick. So that's fine. Get a good kind of developmental edge across from Myles Garrett. And then I like Martin Emerson a lot. I know a lot of people were lower on him, and that might have been a reach to some people, but I thought he was one of the most underrated corners in this class. So they don't need him immediately, but I know that some people have looked into their contract situation, and I think they're a lot of their guys are on expiring contracts pretty soon. So getting a guy for the future that can play really well in zone, and I'm really impressed with Martin Emerson. So some of the values were a little weird, but I think if you do the thing where you kind of reshuffle where players, when you say okay, they got the guys they wanted, they're all really good players, and they'll help out that defense for the most part. So I'm not sure if these are the pieces that are going to push the Browns over the hump long term, but they're all solid players that just improve the quality of your roster overall.
Next up, we have Scott Carousex. Scott, how are we doing today, my guy?
Carousex.
I always mess it up. But how are we doing today, my guy?
I'm doing good. How are y'all doing?
Doing good, man. Now, the Atlanta Falcons, Drake London at number 8, and still no quarterback chosen. What are the Falcons thinking on day 3 of the draft?
They took Desmond Ridder at 74.
Oh, I have not slept at all. I have not slept at all. And I totally forgot Desmond Ridder was an Atlanta Falcon. And
yeah,
Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, why Desmond Ridder overall?
So they love that he was a 4-year starter. They love that he has that chip on his shoulder, that he may not be, how do I put this? He may not be the starter right away, but he's going to fight for everything that he needs. And they want to have that kind of scrappiness to the offense. I was looking up all the prospects they took yesterday, and they basically said, you know what, we're going to take high-level athletes who are team captains, have high character, have high football IQ, and throw them in there and see what happens. And, I mean, even if the film's not perfect, I don't hate that thought process.
Now, for Ridder, he's going to have, if he potentially gets the chance to start next season, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Zach Opheus, potentially Calvin Ridley in a year from now.
Calvin's not playing in Atlanta another down.
Okay, there we go. So it looks like Calvin Ridley will not be in Atlanta. But how does this bode well for Ridder? He's got 2 big targets, and we know he's had a bit of accuracy issues. Do those big targets, take away some of his flaws in accuracy?
I think so, and I think you have to include Auden Tate as well. Auden Tate 6'5", Pitts is 6'6", London's 6'4". They all have massive catch radiuses. And then Zacchaeus, his best thing he does is that underneath drag or going deep as hell. Zacchaeus runs basically 3 routes really well. Can't really do anything else, but if you've got a slot guy and you're running him on drags and he can take it to the house, you don't tend to hate that. But yeah, I think this is a good situation for Ridder. I think he's the right kind of quarterback for this offensive line too. He's got some mobility, so in case the guys are breaking through, he's not getting just the crap kicked out of him. So yeah, Ridder's a great fit for the Falcons. Honestly, Ridder and Willis, you could have flipped a coin and you would have had the right kind of guys. So
I think the other thing which really excited me for the Atlanta Falcons was definitely Troy Anderson, linebacker. Anderson was one of my brand guys, and I'm sort of jealous that the Falcons were able to take him instead of the Miami Dolphins. So what does Anderson bring to this Falcons defense?
He brings the same kind of athleticism that Foye Oluokun had, but when Foye Oluokun tested, he was 210 pounds, and Anderson was 235.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about him gaining weight and losing a lot of the speed that Foye lost. He's got very good instincts. He understands coverage concepts. He understands what the offense is trying to do to him from his experience playing on offense. So that helps out a lot. And again, 3-year team captain, just like Ritter. Getting those guys that are unquestioned leaders on a team that honestly was missing a lot of leadership last year.
Now, Billy, I saw a tweet you posted out about Kobe Bryant going to the Seahawks. What's your take on Kobe Bryant in Seattle?
Yeah, I think it kind of tells me that they're not really married to these long corners anymore, because Kobe Bryant has like 30.5-inch arms. So, remember back in the day, they only drafted guys with over 32-inch arms. They wanted length. So, it seems. Bryant, I think, is pretty good value. I think he's definitely one of the better corners available at this point. I also like Woolen and McCollum, but those guys I thought would be targeted by Seattle given some of the length parameters that they usually had in the past. But Bryant's really good. I thought he got a lot of attention because teams were trying to avoid Sauce Gardner, and I thought he did pretty well when he was asked to make a play.
Now, Bogan, does Kobe Bryant fit the Seahawks scheme well?
Yeah, he fits that scheme perfectly because he was a guy that I thought was his own guy anyway to begin with when you get into the process. Yeah, I like his awareness. I like the way he sees route concepts. His footwork can get a little iffy at times when he struggles with his pad level. But he's a guy that when you think of guys like him, you want to see him go to a situation where they're playing multiple coverages. He's not just sitting there in man coverage all day, because when you put him in a cover 3 scheme, we're talking about a guy who's a veteran who's shown ball skills. That's going to be a fit that's perfect for him in Seattle. And when the pick came by, I was sitting there, I was like, wow, that's a perfect fit for him. It was one of those picks that you wish a guy like Martin Emerson or somebody like that would have ended up in Seattle. So.
Now, the other guy who I had to the Bills in one of my mock drafts was Kaiir Elam to the Bills, and they traded up to pick up Kaiir Elam. Now, Scott, I know you comped him to Xavier Howard. What were some of the similarities you saw between Elam and Xavier Howard?
I think they're just both so good in that press man coverage, but they also both make a lot of plays on the ball. Now, he doesn't have the same ceiling right away that Howard had coming in. Like, I think Howard is a better overall corner now than what I was expecting him to be, but I do think stylistically they're the same kind of guy.
Now, Levi Wallace did leave the Buffalo Bills, which leaves up a number 2 opening for Kaiir Elam to potentially start. Tre'Davious White is injured, and he might be out for the first couple weeks of the season. Bogan, is Elam NFL ready week 1?
Yeah, Elam's gonna be ready week 1. I like Kaiir Elam a lot. He's one of those guys who, like you said, he can play press man. He's a lot better in off covers than people realize he is. He's a pretty fluid mover for his size. He struggles to burst out of his hips immediately, but he does show above average recovery speed. And he's just a dog at the end of the day. You saw him cover guys like Jameson Williams with no problem. And he's an exciting guy to see. He was a guy that I was hoping would go first round, because I got a little concerned that he was going to fall out of the first round. He became one of the forgotten corners in the class, in my opinion. And him going to Buffalo, playing under McDermott, is going to be just perfect for him. I even saw a video yesterday of him, and they made the call to him. His first reaction was like, "Put the playbook on the plane, man. Put the playbook on the plane." And those are guys you want, and those are guys that you see in Buffalo. And he's going to get to learn from a guy like Tre'Davious White. I'm excited to see what he does. I felt like Buffalo was going to go corner first round. So whatever corner they did get was going to be a guy who was coming into a really good situation. I thought it was going to be Booth for the longest time, but I can't be mad at Kaiir Elam at all. He's a top 5 corner for me. Thought it was a first round pick through and through. So it's going to be a good fit for him in Buffalo.
Right. So, an announcement for our watchers here: we will be ending the live stream right before the Miami Dolphins do pick. I will be heading on over and seeing who the Miami Dolphins do pick and covering those reports as well. So, I apologize for it not lasting the entire full 7 rounds. And thank you guys for hopping in. I really, really appreciate it. We got to talk about the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl a little bit as well. Scott, Billy, I believe you guys were there at the Senior Bowl, and
No, I
nope,
wasn't.
nope. All right, that's
I
okay.
I can get an invite any year if I want. I just haven't been since 2015 because work in real life kind of gets in the way of me taking a week off of my day job and going to the Senior Bowl.
Right, and we've heard a lot of Senior Bowl reports that the biggest winners were Perrion Winfrey, who was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and Zion Johnson by the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Billy, what do you know about Zion Johnson, and how can the Chargers basically protect Justin Herbert much better with Zion Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, it forms quite the duo between him and the guy they took last year, Slater. I mean, I think he's a really good job, Zion. I mean, he's versatile. He can play center. He can play guard. I think he's going to play. They're going to play my guard though. But for me, I mean, he's pretty good at getting into his set. Stays balanced really well. I mean, he keeps defenders in front of him. I mean, he's really athletic. So in the run game too, when he's out in space, locates his target and drives them back. I mean, his tape was pretty fun to watch. Not surprised he went to a team like the Chargers. They do a pretty good job of just letting the board fall to them. And yeah, pretty good pick.
Now, Perrion Winfrey to the Cleveland Browns, Scott, was not in the right defensive system at Oklahoma. And there were reports of Winfrey not being 100% into football. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, you're going to get guys every year that aren't 100% into football. They're just doing it for the money or they're just doing it for whatever. As long as he shows up in practice every day and gives his all and does what he needs to do to help his team win, they won't care. There's a lot of guys in the NFL. I'd say probably about 40% of the current players in the NFL that couldn't give two shits about football, that don't love the game. So it's not a shock. I mean, most of those guys do play for like the Jaguars and the Jets, but still, it's not a shock to hear that a guy is not in love with football. It's probably why he fell.
Now, Jeremiah, there were 2 defensive backs taken with the last 2 picks, Percy Butler and the other guy.
Dane Belton here?
Yeah, those 2. I have not done any work on those 2, and I wanted to know if you knew what those defensive backs were.
So Percy Butler's a Shrine Bowl guy. Shrine Bowl stand up, baby. Excited to see him. Excited to see him go this early. He's just a dog at the end of the day. Percy Butler is the best special teams player in all of college football, so that gives him instant impact value from the get go, from the moment he steps into the NFL. And I think that's what makes teams fall in love with him in the beginning. He's going to be a guy who can play in the box. He's going to tackle. I'm excited to see him go this early, to be honest with you. So that's going to be big. Dane Belton's going to be an interesting pick for the Giants because he's a versatile safety, nickel, hybrid type of guy. Shows some ball skills, has instincts to play in the short zone area of the field. You translate his range into that short zone. He's going to be good in the curl flat, hook curl areas. He's going to give you some quarterback spies at times. He can blitz off the edge. He's a guy that I didn't watch till like later in the process, but he's one of those guys like, oh, okay, I kind of like what this is, but you have to have a specific fit for him. And I think the Giants do. The Giants have done a good job in the last year putting together a pretty good secondary. When you talk about Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney, Julian Love, for example, and he kind of fits that identity of what they have going on in their secondary. Is you have a lot of cerebral guys in that secondary, especially when you talk about the hybrids in their defense, like McKinney, Julian Love, the guys who can give you some work plan, match quarters, and give you McKinney can give you some single high work. They can both come down the box and tackle. So I'm excited to see what their plan is for Dane Belton, just to see what his fit will be.
I mean, that Giants draft is just insane right now. I mean, you got the top 2 guys on my personal board in Evan Neal, who I had number 1, and Kayvon Thibodeau, who I had number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then You know, they get that left guard out of North Carolina who's pretty damn good.
Joshua Zudu.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty damn good. Like the Giants have been cleaning up, and then they just go and say, hey, all right, well, it's the 4th round. This is where we take guys we like who are scheme fits. That's what day 3 is about. And they like Butler. He's a scheme fit. One of those things you look at it and you're like, I get why they did it. It's a great pick for them. He may not be a starter long term because they still have Julian Love to go with McKinney. But, you know, it's the NFL. Safeties get hurt all the time. You need to have that third safety on your roster. And a lot of teams are moving into that big nickel. So you got to have that guy that can drop down in the box and play linebacker in more of a star position for when they are in that 4-3 when you go out with that big nickel set.
Now, Scott, as the draft goes on, who are some of your late day draft targets that you would like the Falcons to select?
Well, they just took one of them just went off the board. Ayoma, and I'm sorry if I butcher this. Uwazurike.
Shrine guy, yes sir. Shrine boy.
He's a monster, man. He's like if there's a true nose in this draft that fits what the Falcons do, it was him. Like he's a absolute terror. I really like Thomas Booker. I think Booker's going to be another
Shrine
one
Bowl.
of those. Yeah, like the Shrine is if the Senior Bowl is about the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rounds, the Shrine game is all about day 3. You know, Uwazurike, Booker, I think Rasheed Walker was there too, right?
No.
Okay. So like Rasheed Walker at tackle, Jamarie Sawyer from Georgia. Like there's some talent on both lines. I would be happy if the Falcons had a combined weight of their 3 players that they picked today nearing 1,000 pounds. Like fat guys win championships.
Yeah. Now, day 3 is where you build your roster, and that roster will help you move deep into the playoffs and potentially the Super Bowl as well. JB, talk to us about Ayoma Uwazurike and what he brings onto the field and some of his, his skill sets that he's going to bring into Denver.
Like Scott said, you got a guy who can play your 0. He can play a shade. He can play a 1. He's a guy. He's actually really athletic for his size. Surprisingly, he's got a good first step to him. Would like to see him do a little more as a pass rusher, but he's definitely a guy who can push the pocket. He's good at running his feet on contact to ruin the anchors of guards and centers and interior linemen. So Denver's a team that's really heavy on their defense. So it's going to be exciting to see how he fits. Usually when you think of Denver, you're thinking about what they're going to do in the secondary. So it's exciting to see them take a D lineman here, and especially a guy who had a really good week for us at Shrine. A good kid as well. You get to be around these guys. So it's pretty exciting.
Boxing gloves for hands too, man. Just pop every down. Like you line him up over that center by the middle of the 2nd quarter. That center's like, man, can we get some help? This guy is just punching me right in my chest.
He can wear you out.
Now, I think Damari Mathis just got picked up as well. As I'm watching this stream, I don't know what team is for. I believe maybe
Broncos took him.
The Broncos. Yeah. There we go. Damari Mathis, defensive back, cornerback from Pittsburgh, just got picked up. We haven't talked a lot about Malik Willis yet. Now he goes to Tennessee. He's going to be the backup to Ryan Tannehill, and eventually, I do think he's going to be the starter very, very, very soon. Maybe kind of like a Patrick Mahomes 1-year situation. Now, look, I think out of all the teams within that 3rd round that picked him up, I think Tennessee might have been the best development opportunity for him, just because he has that offensive line support he hasn't had at Liberty. He's got wide receivers that fit a little bit to his skill set, but they need a little bit more of pass catchers in their room. The other thing is, they have Derrick Henry. They have a monster running
That's
back.
the answer right there.
That's the answer for Malik Willis. And for a lot of young quarterbacks, at this stage in their career. Do you guys agree or disagree that you think Tennessee is a good development place for Malik Willis? Scott, you first.
Yeah.
I think it is a great developmental spot for Willis because that coach isn't going anywhere. That GM isn't going anywhere. They're not risking their jobs on his pick. They have a good support system in the fact that they have a running game. They have a defense. They have, again, they may not be the best receivers in the NFL, but Robert Woods is no slouch. Treylon Burks is a very good receiver as well. Like, those guys fit with what he does stylistically. And I think we kind of focus too much on value as draft analysts, and we need to focus more on what does the player do and how does he fit this team. Because I think if we focus more on the second part, we would realize that maybe our value is low, but their value for that player, they are drafting these guys with either high or at least mid-level expectations. So Burks may not be the ideal wide receiver. He may not have been the best value. He may not be what we think fits Tennessee, but they love him and they have a plan for him if they're taking him.
Oh, man. The Jets just got one of my guys, Michael Clemens from Texas A&M. This Jets draft class is so good, and it pains me to say as a Dolphins fan, and I'm just like, like
Mitchell was good too, man. Max Mitchell's
a good one too.
Good pick, yeah.
He's gonna start right away for them at right tackle.
He definitely will. Connor McDermott hasn't been what the Jets hoped they would. But back to the Malik Willis talk, JB.
Did I text you yesterday and tell you that I predicted him to go to the Titans before the draft?
Yes, you did. You did.
Yeah.
You did say that you predicted Willis to go to the Titans. And
I
why is
like,
that?
First of all, my first reasoning is it's usually never the teams that we expect to take a guy that end up taking guys when it comes to the draft. I feel like Tennessee was just one of those situations. If there was a surprise team to put themselves in the sweepstakes, they're in the perfect system for him to not have to come in and be anything immediately. He can come in, have his process, sit behind Ryan Tannehill, be under a good coach, and like you mentioned, he like for value wise, they got guys that fit their system. They got a guy who they valued, and they probably valued him higher than what the league had, and you just keep seeing him fall and fall and fall. And it's like, okay, he falls into our lap here, I believe 86, and it gives him a chance to just develop. And when you talk about tools, he has plenty of tools that you can develop. He has the arm strength. He's an incredible athlete. Maybe if you even get to a situation where you bring him in for design run plays, and now you have him and Derrick Henry back there doing some sort of read option, quarterback powers, you can add an extra element to your offense. So seeing Malik Willis go to the situation, I was a little disappointed that he did get picked by the home team. Being able to see another quarterback at number 7 for the Falcons would have been fun.
He wouldn't have worn number 7.
He probably wouldn't have.
Young Wei Koo, man, that's my boy. That's my young ho.
But I think it's a great situation for Malik to walk into. Doesn't have to be anything immediately. Gets a chance to sit back, catch the speed of the NFL game. It's going to be interesting to see his development. I also loved about this class. One thing I loved about this class, having quarterbacks taken in the 3rd round here too, is with a great quarterback class next year on the horizon, you taking the quarterback in the 3rd round doesn't mean you have to be married to him as your future franchise guy that you have to develop. So if you end up in a situation next year where you're at the top of the draft, say Ryan Tannehill, you don't like Ryan Tannehill next year, you end up at the front half of the draft, you can get Stroud, Young, or even the Van Dyke kid from Miami going to be starting to rise in next year's class. And you're in a situation where, okay, now I have draft capital on Malik Willis that I could trade to somebody who's interested in him next year to trade, and I can just get my real who you think is actually your quarterback of the future and somebody you're willing to take in the top 5 picks or even trade up for in next year's class. So I think that's what makes this class interesting. I like how the NFL didn't fall into the trap of the weak quarterback class and kind of let guys fall, just let them come to them. Because now I think so many teams are putting themselves in good positions next year, like the Lions, for example. I think you're in a better situation if you build your roster beforehand and give your real franchise quarterback a chance to walk into something immediately Like you walk, like whoever comes in for the Lions next year, you're walking in with Jameson Williams. You're walking in with a defense that's been pretty well set up. Brad Holmes has done a good job of constructing that roster. He's given them an identity, and that identity is going to continue to be built over the next year before the quarterback ever even steps into the field. And it's going to give them a chance to succeed off the rip. So I'm excited about that.
And the way the Lions are building for this is what NFL teams should have been doing the last couple of years. Scott, you want to get a word in?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. That's why I don't mind the Atlanta Falcons taking Ritter at 74. Like, worst case scenario for Ritter, he's your career backup in a similar way that like Jason Garrett was for the Cowboys for a decade. Like, and if he's a career backup, worst case scenario, that's not a bad backup to have. You know, build your roster, build the guys. Like there's not too much investment in him at the third round where you have to worry about things like 5th-year options and big contracts. Like a third round pick makes just over league minimum his entire contract. So you're not really giving away too much there. And then just to go back to Jeremiah's point, he was saying, you know, if they don't like Tannehill or Tannehill may not be their guy for the future, always follow the money. You know, Tannehill has an out in his contract after this season. When you go through all the different quarterback contracts, you have to find like, man, this guy may not be here this year because his contract expires here. And if he doesn't have a good season, he's just done.
Yep.
Now, before we end this, Jeremiah and Scott, the Dolphins are heavily rumored to be interested in another running back, let's say like an Isaiah Spiller, Pierre Strong Jr., potentially, Jerome Ford from Cincinnati, defensive back like Jalen Armour-Davis from Alabama. Darion Kendrick was in Miami on a 30 visit in Miami as well. Mario Goodrich is also available on the board. Scott, let's talk about running backs in this Mike McDaniel system. I know we've talked a lot about the Dolphins' offense, this offensive scheme, and the way he utilizes his running backs. If Isaiah Spiller is still available at pick 125, do you foresee the Dolphins taking him?
I think they'd be stupid not to. Because Isaiah Spiller is that ideal Shanahan system, you know, zone blocking with the cutback on the backside. Alex Gibbs invented it kind of system that half the league runs now, really. And
the Ravens just took Armour-Davis.
Oh man,
what a great pick!
Good pick. Good pick. Oh,
I know a lot of people talk about Josh Jobe from that Bama defense. Yeah. He is trash. He shouldn't be drafted. But Armour-Davis is really, really good.
Now, JB, now that Armour-Davis is gone, leaves DK, Mario Goodrich, and maybe Zymokov or Tariq Woolen. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Dolphins. You would think they would attack some of their corner depth because their secondary all across the board is very, very, very good. It's just when you start to get into the depth of it, you want to see them add more depth at those positions. And I think getting a guy like Darren Kendrick, even if you get a Mario Goodrich, and I think we talked about this yesterday as well. Mario Goodrich would be a great fit because in that Brett Venables defense, you're exposed to so many exotic looks, a lot of different zone coverages, a lot of those trap coverages. He could fit in Miami perfectly. Darren Kendrick played at Clemson earlier in his career, so he could fit in perfectly. I think another guy to look out for, one of my favorite corners in the draft, and I think one of the best movers overall, is to see where Jack Jones goes. Another Shrine guy, uber talented corner. He did a great job during the interview process, answering all the character concerns. A guy I spent time with down here in Vegas as well. He's talented, man. He's a guy who can give you some nickel versatility as well, play on the outside, and I'm excited to see what the Dolphins do because the Dolphins roster is so solid. Like, it's such a solid roster. And now everything they do at this point is just adding luxury to the roster, adding depth at different positions that you want, maximizing your strengths. Like, if you want to go have an uberly talented secondary, add a Mario Goodrich, add a Darren Kendrick. at those kind of guys. But the Dolphins are such a sound roster that you get really excited, and maybe they even address some offensive line depth. You never know. So I think there's a lot of value on the board left for them.
That's right. Miami could get like a guy like Zach Thomas, Alfredo Arteaga was saying from Wake Forest, and Alec Lindstrom if they just straight up need a center. Defensive back like Amari Goodrich or Darion Kendrick. I mean, like those would be guys. If I was a GM, I'd be targeting. And then you have a running back like Isaiah Spiller, who was my number one running back on the board. Now, if my number one running back is on the board, I would think about what our roster holds, right? We have Raheem Mostert. His contract, I believe, is up by the end of the season. You have Myles Gaskin.
Whoa! Patriots about to take Jack Jones here.
Look at that! Wow, that is a fit, man. That is a fit for New England, and I know you and I were talking about it. Cole Strange, picked up at 29. Who else did they pick up in the second round? I'm forgetting, but it felt like a reach to me as well. I'll think. Oh, there we go. Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor as well. I felt like he was more so like a 4th or 5th round guy. Jack Jones fits. He's versatile. Bill Belichick likes versatile defensive backs. Can play safety, can play corner as well. Brandon Smith was picked up by the Carolina Panthers, but I would like to see Isaiah Spiller in Miami just for the fact that you get your running back of the future to partner with Tua Tagovailoa. And if Mike McDaniel and this offense is productive next season, you could have immense growth from Tua, from Isaiah Spiller, your wide receivers in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, along with Mike Gesicki. Like, this offense will be fast. It will be insanely, insanely fast. Scott, before we let everybody go, where can our followers find you at?
I'm at Around the Block. I do. I'm VP of content, but I'm also trying to run the draft next year. I know that might be a little weird to hear, but I've been doing draft stuff for years. Fucking love it. And then you can find me on Twitter. It's at Carousex. I put it in the handle here at the bottom. But yeah, just hit me up if you ever want to just talk ball. I love football. I absolutely love it. So I'm always down to talk ball.
Hey, B, I know you've been on the podcast a couple times as well. Where can our followers find you at as well?
You see it, Blessed Spoken 5. I don't tweet as much, but every now and then I give some analysis. I'm about to get my Jack Jones tweet off right here real quick. I'm gonna have some more Shrine Bowl tweets for you guys as our guys get picked throughout the day. I'm so excited for Jack Jones, man. He answers being around him all week at Shrine Bowl, hearing all the character concerns people had about him. I've got nothing but great things to say about who that kid is as a person. He's determined. He's focused. He's locked in. He's ready to take on the next phase in his NFL career, and he's gonna do good things at the next level.
Of course, it looks like the Raiders just took Xavier White, Zeus
from
Georgia. I know they didn't pick up Josh Jacobs' 5th-year option, so that is going to be worth monitoring. But Scott,
I'm gonna tell you right now, man. If Zeus hadn't torn his ACLs twice, that man would have been a 2nd-round pick. He is just a beast.
He is a beast. He definitely is a beast. And before we let everybody go, we have Ethan here. This next pick is likely going to be BPA for the Miami Dolphins. If it is BPA,
it's Isaiah Spiller.
It should be Isaiah Spiller in my opinion. But if it is a need, do not be surprised if it is an offensive lineman or potentially defensive back. But before we let everybody go, guys, just a quick shout out for our sponsor, Prize Picks. Make sure you guys, if you have not already, register on Prize Picks and use the promo code 5. Again, that is FIVE to get 100% matching on your deposit. Again, code is 5. Scott, JB, thank you guys for coming on so much. And as always, guys, make sure to follow the Scouting Combine on the 5 Reasons Sports Network on YouTube. Stay with us for draft coverage on the web, on Twitter as well. 3 Yards Per Carry will have a post-draft analysis. So will the Scouting Combine and a lot of articles coming your way. As always, guys, fins up, baby.